It's Pride Month. It's time to start all the gay. Everything is gay now. Everything is gay. Hello everyone, my name is Tom, and today we're going to talk about what it's like being gay and watching cartoons, or being straight and watching cartoons that will inevitably indoctrinate you into being gay, because that's what cartoons do when you put gay in them. I watched Sailor Moon once, and now I'm a magical girl. Before we get into this video, it's relevant to mention that I'm bisexual, for those of you who didn't know. I find all sorts of guys and gals attractive, and for different reasons, which makes me a bisexual. Yes, we do exist. As for just the contents of this video, I'm of course going to start with some background, then move into some examples, and some of the examples are going to be a little more vague than others, just because I don't want to kill y'all with talking. So now we got all that, we're on the same page. It's Pride Month, let's get into it. So being bisexual and growing up through the societal struggles of what that means and how that causes people to perceive me, LGBT plus representation in media is a thing that's very personal for me. It's a topic where hearing people talk about how it's wrong or it's inappropriate to incorporate same-sex couples or LGBT plus people into cartoons or children's media, like that makes me just straight up uncomfortable. And it's not because those people have a different opinion than me, it's because those people are speaking from a place that my existence, just me being here right now, is intrinsically taboo or deviant. Being bisexual, if I show up to a family event with a girl on my arm, it's way to go, you guys seem so cute together, she seems nice, why are you getting married? But if I were to show up to a family function with a guy on my arm, of course different parts of my family would be more accepting of that than others, but what I might expect is, how could you do that when you know there are going to be children here? I thought your parents raised a man, you're going through a phase, when are you getting married? Auntie just wants me to get married. And to this day, I still see and confront these types of mentalities in the world. And they're very prominently on display, despite the fact that I'm pretty low-key about being bisexual. Like, right now I'm talking about it because it's relevant to the video, and because it's Pride. But honestly, I usually go for girls like a lot more than I go for guys. And it's pretty easy for me to just kind of blend into society as the heterosexual passing person. Which is a privilege, I know. I'm like the logic of gay people, where if I don't tell you every 5 seconds that I'm gay, you might forget. Which is why I'm more susceptible to hearing and seeing a lot more casual homophobia, which I'm always like, nah bro, just stop. Don't do that around me. And don't give me that, oh, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about those other gays. Like, bro, nah, you're still inciting and practicing prejudice and hatred towards people like me. So regardless of if it's directed at me or not, I'm still gonna be affected by it. And also, even if I wasn't, homophobia isn't cool, bro. Just don't do it. Anyways, now that we've talked about all of that, let's talk about LGBT representation. So what is good representation across all platforms, for all groups? What is good representation? Well, after going around, researching, taking in a ton of different perspectives, I've come to realize that there are a lot of really black and white rules as to what is good and what is bad, and it's usually pretty subjective. So having people be that black and white and having people just not even agree on what is and is bad, it's kind of confusing, a little frustrating, especially since this is the type of thing where you gotta go into it with nuance. Like, in some cases something might be bad, and in other cases it might not be. It depends a lot on context and execution. It almost seems like there is no such thing as good LGBT representation, just because there's so much disagreement on what that should look like. For example, in your face, stereotypical gay characters are usually considered bad representation, but why? It's not like those people don't exist in real life. Like, I know plenty of gay people who are out and proud, and they can be considered stereotypical. I also know a lot of gay people who are, like me, low-key. They don't advertise it, it's not very obvious just by looking at them, but they are still gay. And even then, some of their experiences can be considered stereotypical, like, for example, how they came out, how they experienced the world around them. So which one of these is the correct way to represent LGBT plus characters? Well, to me, why are either of them wrong? If they both exist in real life, there's some validity, that's a word. There's some validity to that representation. And usually, not always, but usually the school of thought seems to be having a flaming homosexual in your cartoon, having a character like that, will be hard to accept for heterosexual audiences and make it harder for gay people in real life to be accepted. Which I could see the point there, but it seems like those people who have trouble accepting it probably just don't like gay people. It's the typical, I'm okay with gay people, just don't be gay around me. I'm okay with gay characters as long as they ain't gay. I'm gonna say gay a lot in this video. So what happens is you say you're going to create stories about LGBT plus characters, but only ones that are deemed acceptable by the same society that has marginalized those people. So as a result, you have all these queer people in real life who aren't correct in their queerness, who don't have any representation beyond stories where their sexuality is framed as a flaw. Because even if you and someone else are part of the same section of the LGBT plus community, it doesn't mean that your experiences and how you confront the world with that identity are going to be exactly the same. Your experiences are going to differ, and when you write stories about that, those differences are going to come out. And because of this, I feel like it's really important to have both the low-key and the stereotypical characters alongside each other. Granted, if you do go the stereotypical route, that's not where the character starts and ends. It's not good if the character is a villain who the entire fact that they're a villain is based on the fact that they're queer. And if you're like talking about a comedy, if you make a gay character, the joke shouldn't be that they're gay. Like, it shouldn't be like, oh, look at this gay character, ha ha ha, isn't it funny how gay they are? Like, of course you can make jokes about that, but that's something that, like, gay writers should be doing. Like, it's all about the darkness. Like, if you're gay, you understand the darkness of being gay, you understand the problems, you understand that experience, and it's easy to make jokes about it. But if you're a straight person making jokes about gay people, like, that's kind of not cool. And even then, you should have more depth to the character than just, yo, this is a flaming homosexual. Which there have been a lot of those characters in adult cartoons. And I'll admit, like, it's gotten better. It's gotten better. Even the shows that are kind of guilty of doing that in the past, they've gotten better of how they represent gay characters in their shows. But even then, there aren't a whole lot of flaming gays in animation that get to actually be characters beyond that. And I wish there were more. But let's move on from that to talk about coding. So coding is when you have representation through either metaphor or key details. Like, it might not really be there, but there's some subtext going on where you as the audience, you're like, alright, I see what they're doing. One way this can be done is through a fictional scenario or story that isn't exactly talking about a certain thing, but it has a lot of the aspects of that thing. It's drawing parallels to real-life experiences. So an example would be with Steve Rogers in Captain America: The First Avenger. There's a lot of parallels there to code the story as being a story about a trans man. Steve Rogers wants to fill a traditionally masculine role in society, but he is genetically and physically dealt a poor hand where he can't do that. Therefore, he has to transition into a super soldier so that he can fulfill his role and inner identity. Now, am I saying that Steve Rogers is actually trans because of this? No. I mean, I don't know. Like, he could be, I don't know. Like, his girl's name is Peggy, so maybe. But what I'm saying is the experience is coded to reflect the experiences of trans men in real life. Whether or not it is intentional, that story is resonating with these people. And coding is used a lot for LGBT plus stories in animation a lot, because straight up showing stuff like that in children's media is problematically problematic, meaning it is problematic, and that in and of itself is problematic. But sometimes it's not even really in the writing. Sometimes it can just be in, like, the character design. For example, him from Powerpuff Girls is coded to be queer through his mannerisms and character design, and in the writing, it's never really stated, as far as I remember, that he is actually queer. And examples like this are also why coding can sometimes be framed as a negative thing, because him in a vacuum isn't really bad representation, but the fact that this was a character who was queer in a time where there really weren't a lot of queer characters on TV, and they were a villain, that kind of makes it not the best. But him is a much better way to do coding than that one Powerpuff Girls 2016 episodes with the unicorn, who they were very clearly coding the story around as trans. Then the professor transitions the unicorn with, like, one of his inventions, and then the unicorn became like a giant disgusting monster, and like that just had a lot of really yikes undertones and yikes overtones. It was just yikes overall. I mean, they apologized for it at least, but like, yikes. Which then leads us into ambiguous representation, where it's implied that a character is gay, but with no definitive answer within the text itself. And by text itself, I mean they didn't go in an interview and be like, oh yeah, this character was gay all along. Like, I mean, like, if you watched the show, would you know for a fact that they are gay? And I don't feel like going into specific aspects of this specifically, because I kind of want to focus more on the modern animation and how we're representing the LGBT plus community now. And this was kind of something that was more prominent in the 90s and early 2000s, where they would have a kind of meek or flamboyant man or a butch or straightforward woman and be like, hey, they might possibly maybe sort of be gay. But now they do it a lot better, where it's more common to have just straight up gay characters in the background or have them be minor characters and just have them show up and exist within the universe, which has been done by Clarence. It's been done by Star vs. the Forces of Evil. It's been done by Craig of the Creek. It's been done by The Loud House. And that's a whole lot better than, yo, this character might kind of sort of maybe not really but also kind of sort of be gay. It's a lot better to just be like, yeah, these characters are gay. Maybe this story isn't necessarily about them. Maybe they aren't getting the most screen time, but this is the world that we live in and people are gay. But here's the thing. Is we live in a world with a lot of homophobia and transphobia. You got countries that won't allow any of this type of content to be shown or broadcasted in their media, period. You have corporations that are openly against gay and trans people and want nothing to do with anything LGBT+. Because of this, making a successful cartoon that can have the same distribution as other cartoons that has anything gay or trans in it can be a losing battle. So as a result, you see a lot of ambiguous or last minute, after the fact representation. Sometimes this can actually work, sometimes it doesn't work, and sometimes it's kinda, One example of this that people stay pretty split on is Korrasami, or Korra and Asami from The Legend of Korra, where the two were vaguely revealed as lovers in the last minute of the TV show. The two later had more development in the comics, but I haven't read the comics yet, so I can't really talk about whether or not they were portrayed well in that source of media, so we're just going to talk about the cartoon. Which in the cartoon, that's a very heavily criticized example. Some even accuse it of queerbaiting, which doesn't make sense to me, because in order to queerbait your audience, you have to bait your audience. You have to mislead them and imply that there will be some sort of gay or trans representation, only to not actually deliver on that. Which Legend of Korra didn't do. They didn't mislead anyone. Voltron, on the other hand, is guilty of queerbaiting because they spent all of their promotion for Season 7 hyping up this queer relationship between Adam and Shiro, only to have Adam appear in the first episode for about 20 seconds and then reveal that he's dead. And then that's it. That's all you get. That's, alright you gays, like, here, I gave you something, go nuts. That's basically what they did. And this was queerbaiting because the show and staff were really pushing the fact that they were going to be portraying an on-screen, openly gay relationship in the story. And all we got was a blink and you miss it scene where they didn't even explicitly say that they were intimately involved. Yes, Shiro is confirmed as gay, but by undercutting the acknowledgement of him being gay to this degree, makes it really difficult to celebrate this as representation, especially since it falls under the bury your gays trope, which is where you introduce a gay character just to kill them off, which it's weird that that happens enough to the point where it's a trope, but it happens enough to the point where it's a trope. But my point is what Voltron did is queerbaiting, and it's a lot worse than what Legend of Korra did, where they just gave us a vague queer relationship with no build-up that just kind of came out of nowhere. Would have been better if they built it up more explicitly and actually had them kiss on screen? Absolutely, definitely. But it wasn't misleading or malicious. It was just really poorly executed. This was primarily blamed on the network, Nickelodeon, for not wanting explicit gay representation, even though the writers expressed that they really wanted to explore that relationship more, but they weren't able to. Alex Hirsch went through similar battles with Disney on his show Gravity Falls, where background characters were changed from gay to straight upon Disney's request. And according to Alex Hirsch himself, he thinks that the only reason that he was allowed to confirm the same-sex relationship between the deputy and the sheriff in the last episode of the show was because Disney was just happy to be done dealing with him. But those battles with the network did end up meaning something because they paved the way for Darren Nefsey, the creator of Star vs. the Forces of Evil, to get away with the things that Alex Hirsch couldn't. In regards to Korrasami though, I'm not gonna dress down or defend what it was. At the end of the day, it was the intention of showing a romantic relationship between two women that was very limited by the network, and even given those circumstances, it wasn't executed that well. But even if it's not good, it's not problematic. I'm much happier that we have it than if we were to not have it. Plus, it gave the fandom a canon queer relationship between two characters that they were really happy to see get together. And I don't think anybody who's actually cool is like, yo, I'm mad that Korra and Asami got together at the end. Even if it leaves a lot to be desired. And maybe that stuff that's desired is in the comics, but like I said, I don't know. I can't talk about that. I'm not educated enough, so I'm gonna just move on to a similar situation that was handled better. Adventure Time, the show to bring Cartoon Network and Western animation as a whole into the new decade, was a smash hit for a long time. And today, Adventure Time's contributions to the gay world we live in are through the characters Princess Bubblegum and Marceline. This was another instance of a network being apprehensive of telling a story about two young women in love, but in this case you can tell that the writers were putting as much care and effort into this relationship as they possibly could. It's also not hard to believe that Cartoon Network was probably a bit more lenient on this compared to other networks just based on hindsight. From subtle hints of tension and admiration in the beginning, building towards bonding and closeness to the point where they were practically a verbal acknowledgement away from being an on-screen canon couple. There was very blatantly something between Bubblegum and Marceline, and it was acknowledged outside of the show, outside of the text, that they were a couple. But if you were only going based on what you were seeing on screen, it was possible that these were just two really close gal pals. But then the finale hit, they said gay rights, just like Korosami, except they actually kissed. And it was just an overall more satisfying moment, especially with the fact that they were building this up for so long. But of course, by this point, a former Adventure Time writer, who was very much responsible for Bubbleen happening, was already off making animation gay in her own way. After Rebecca Sugar initiated this relationship, she went off into the world to create a story about lesbian space rocks that we all know and love. Steven Universe was the first kids cartoon that was just straight up portraying LGBT+ characters up front and frequently. Steven's mom, Pearl's gay for her. Garnet, literally gay for herself. Non-binary characters, got him. Gay characters, got him. Gay relationships, got him. Gay crushes, got him. Gay weddings. Yes, there's a gay wedding between two female-presenting characters that Rebecca Sugar was willing to die for. The relationship between Ruby and Sapphire is possibly the biggest thing for same-sex representation in children's media. A relationship where you see how much they love each other through a physical manifestation of that love, which also just so happens to be one of the most badass characters in the show. And when they aren't together, we're watching them fight and make up like a real couple. What a concept, right? A real relationship between two women being shown to children, and it's not inappropriate, it's not explicit, it's not taboo, it is. These are two people caring for each other, disagreeing, communicating, sacrificing, and just genuinely loving one another, which has been portrayed in children's animated media forever for heterosexual characters, so there's no reason that that should become inappropriate when you make those characters the same gender. Having stories like this can hopefully open up people's eyes to the fact that it's completely ridiculous to believe that portraying an LGBT relationship is inappropriate or intrinsically adult, which is why this is so important. But this video has been a bit too dominated by discussion around sexuality, which partly comes from me being cis and not having that perspective to really have that stuff jump out at me, but it's also partly just through a lack of representation for trans people in media overall. But you know what? Trans rights are human rights. It's pride. Let's talk about some gender stuff. Steven Universe focuses really heavily on the mechanic of fusion, a strategy for gems to fuse together to become bigger, stronger, and better. But Steven, being half a gem, only ever fuses with women or feminine identifying characters. So as a result, Stevonnie, Smoky Quartz, Rainbow Quartz 2.0, and Sunstone are all non-binary. But we get the most focus on Stevonnie because out of all of these characters, they're the most human and connected to Earth, and also just because they were the first Steven fusion we saw. Though most of Stevonnie's struggles as a character come from the fact that they are two kids combined and thrown into an adult world, them being non-binary is still a relevant and very important aspect of who they are. This is a good example of how to make a low-key LGBT+ character that viewers can relate to and empathize with while still unapologetically existing as their identity, effectively humanizing non-binary people in real life and making it feel more normal. For me personally, Stevonnie is my favorite character not because they're non-binary, but because they're genuinely interesting. The motif of feeling mutually alone with someone or just being isolated in general is one that really resonates with me. Then there's just such a strong sense of self with Stevonnie, like a confidence and strength in who they are because of the closeness between Steven and Connie, which is an energy I really admire. It's an energy that's honest, it's goofy, it's powerful, it's Stevonnie. This and the fact that their design is just really aesthetically pleasing. They're always serving a look that is both fashionable and expressive of who they are as a character. And the fact that they're non-binary is just another aspect of their character that makes them special. But remember when we were talking about coding earlier? Now, we're gonna bring this in and talk about it in this context of this show, where there's some pretty blatant aspects of being trans in Steven's relationship to Homeworld. Homeworld knew Steven as Rose Quartz, or Pink Diamond later on. Spoilers, if you haven't seen it, too late. You've been spoiled. Bam. Because even though Steven's not the same character as his mother, because he has her gem, they treat him like he's her. And they even reprimand him for the fact that he has decided to live as a young boy instead of Rose Quartz or Pink Diamond. And obviously this is mostly a story about Steven being forced to take responsibility for the crimes, mistakes, and overall baggage that his mother left behind, but that's a whole aspect that I've gone into depth on in other videos. If you want me to talk about that, just watch those. But there's also many aspects of the story that can echo what it feels like to be trans. Mainly, being called Rose or Pink Diamond by Homeworld can be interpreted as Homeworld dead naming Steven, which dead naming is when you go to a trans person and refer to them by the name that they no longer go as, choosing to ignore their new identity and denying them even the basic courtesy of using their real name or even their real pronouns. As Homeworld and the Diamonds actively choose to ignore the fact that Steven is not his mother. For their own comfort, they choose not to call Steven by his name because they decided that Steven is just Pink Diamond parading around as a young boy. And it's even more comparable to this because they literally misgender him. They literally use female pronouns because that's what Pink Diamond went by. Then in the end, when White Diamond is hell-bent on proving that Steven is Pink Diamond, he is Rose Quartz, she literally rips the gem out of his body, nearly killing him in the process, by the way, because she is hell-bent on proving that Steven has deceived himself into believing that he is who he is, that he's no longer Pink Diamond. It really brings everything together to echo what it feels like to have your friends, your family, even society tell you that your new identity is you just lying to yourself to protect your own feelings, and it's not really who you are. You are who they think you are, the person you used to be. And if you disagree, then you're delusional because you're disputing facts. And there's even a sense where the audience even starts to question whether Steven is actually Steven or if he's actually some form of Pink Diamond. Even though we spent the entire show with Steven, we have learned to empathize with him, we know that he is who he is, and we see the differences between him and Pink Diamond, but because of the nature of how he came into existence, along with the in-universe speculation, it made us question his own identity. Even with compassion for Steven and looking at the situation from his perspective, we are still speculating that maybe he is actually Pink Diamond, which as a cis person makes it easier for me to understand that existing as trans must be so difficult, from the perspective of constantly being met with doubt, and being told constantly that you can never truly be the gender that you identify with. I can't imagine the stress that comes with deciding that you need to change your gender in a process that takes years, and trying to be sure enough to justify it to yourself that it's worth it, while dealing with dysphoria on top of that. Then being told on top of all of that that you're delusional, that no matter how much your body chemistry changes, no matter how many surgeries you get, whether or not you pass, even if you feel like you are better at being the person you are now than you were before, there will always be that voice in the back of your head telling you that maybe you're wrong. That maybe you're just running away from your true identity. But in this moment where White Diamond was literally willing to kill Steven in order to prove that he was wrong, in that moment where Steven's gem projection chose not Pink Diamond, not Rose Quartz, but Steven, that moment was showing that Steven is Steven, that his new identity was his true identity. It was who he really was, and not just a lie he told himself. Steven is Steven, and he is who he thinks he is, just like you are who you think you are, who you know you are. And with that piece of Steven Universe concluding, I feel like that's a really solid message to end on that reflects the overall tone of what Steven Universe is about. But this doesn't end at Steven Universe. There's a new show that is doing so much for LGBT representation. She-Ra and the Princesses of Power is quite possibly the best show for LGBT representation, and if it's not right now, it probably will be. Showrunner Noelle Stevenson is in a real-life same-sex relationship, and throughout all of her past projects has been very adamant in representing the LGBT community. She has even been famously quoted as saying, "Assume all of my characters are gay unless I explicitly state otherwise." And while our shows may explicitly be representing more of the LGBT+ community, you have to remember that She-Ra is technically not even 2 seasons in, and they have already done so much. We already saw Bo's dads in an episode where Bo, hiding his involvement with the rebellion, was coded as a gay or trans teen, hiding their identity from their parents, and it was being done in the context of hiding it from 2 gay dads. We have Spinnerella and Natasa explicitly being in a relationship together, Scorpia very blatantly having a crush on Catra, and the implication that maybe Adora and Catra's relationship goes deeper than just friends. Plus, Season 1 ended with all the protagonists coming together and forming a rainbow to defeat the evil horde. Even if there's still more that they can do, This is a lot. This is a whole lot of, like, yo, gay rights, bro. Let's talk about trans rep, though. There are theories out there that, Bo is trans, and after my Season 2 review, people were saying that, maybe Bo's dads, one of them is trans, allowing them to reproduce. My point is, aside from headcanons, there unfortunately is not any trans representation in She-Ra and the Princesses of Power yet. But given the moral tone and the audience of the show, I hope that's something that we will end up seeing in the future. Especially since with the increase in gay, bi, pan, and lesbian representation, there's still not a whole lot of representation for trans characters, which I definitely think is really important right now, because now more than ever there are a whole lot of openly trans people in the world and not a lot of representation, and that adds on to the inability for people to empathize with trans people in real life. But with how much She-Ra and the Princesses of Power has done so far, they're setting themselves apart from everyone else in this category, and all I can do is hope that they don't stop pushing for more LGBT+ representation in their show, which they've already done an amazing job of so far. So, as always, my name is Sam, happy Pride Month, and tell me some of your favorite examples of LGBT+ representation in animation, maybe that I didn't even cover. I stuck to Western animation, I know there's a ton in anime. Tell me some stuff I didn't talk about, and as always, I'll see you next time. Roll the outro. Thank you for watching Let's Talk with Tom on the Roundtable, but Tom isn't just on the Roundtable. I have my own self-titled personal channel, I have a Twitter, I have an Instagram, I have a Snapchat, I have all that good stuff. In fact, I even have a Tumblr. So, if you're interested in any of that, check that out, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye!